Hello, everyone. I'm the Bodacious Cowboy with my co host, Christy Knichel. Are you ready for a special edition of the Storytelling Chronicles? We are. Let's go.
Look out! Pop, pop, it's showtime. 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 Guess who's back again? Oh, they don't know. Gone tell. Oh, they don't know. Gone tell. I bet they know as soon as we walk in. Showed up. I'm wearing Cuban links. Yeah. Designer mix. Yeah. Inglewood's finest shoes. Whoop, whoop. Don't look too hard, might hurt yourself. Known to give the color red the blues.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Storytelling Chronicles. It's Monday, the 10th of June. I can't believe that we're almost halfway through June already. Today, we have an excellent guest. Her name is Casey Jenkins. You've probably seen a lot of her posts and content on LinkedIn. If you haven't, you really should. She is one smart girl. Let's bring her in. Casey, how are you?
Hello. Happy Monday. I am doing well, but it has been a Monday. And I can't believe we're halfway through June either. Like, where has the year gone?
I know. It's absolutely insanity, to be honest.
It is. I mean, think about it. It's almost through half a year. I mean, it's chaotic. You know, we were talking in the background, in the back room about how the days can be so chaotic. I mean, when you think about time and how fast that it moves, it's because it's not either. You're really busy. You're really trying to get a lot of things done in only 24 hours and still trying to get some sleep.
Right. I was going to say pretty soon we'll be looking at like holiday. Everyone's going to start talking about holiday season. I mean, in about 15 days, we're only 6 months out. So.
Right. I know. It's crazy. Well, let me tell all of our guests a little bit about you first, Casey, and then we'll get into the questions and learn more about you.
Sounds good.
Casey Jenkins, as she is known, is the owner of 88 Consulting LLC and results-oriented business professional specializing in supply chain and process improvement. With over a decade of diverse experience, dual master's degree in supply chain management and project management, and a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, Casey expertly navigates and resolves intricate supply chain challenges. Casey has generated approximately $15 million in savings through key initiatives and completed over 20 projects throughout her career. Committed to lifelong learning, at the beginning of this year, she began pursuing a Doctor of Business Administration in Supply Chain Management and Logistics in January of 2024. Known for her work ethic, motivation, and passion for growth, Casey leads by serving others and fostering a collaborative and high-achieving work environment. Wow. Is there anything else I missed there, Casey?
I don't think so.
I feel like you're definitely the smartest person in the room for sure.
Thank you.
I don't know about that.
Hey,
you
someone
are.
who actually quit college because I was working for my father, right? Never went back. Like, that's definitely impressive.
Well, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about what that means, how you got into the industry, and what you're doing.
Yeah. So it's funny because I feel like when I talk to people about how they got into this industry, it's either they had family who did it or they fell into it by chance. Okay. And I feel like I fell into it by chance and stayed in it by choice once I got involved. I always wanted to be a meteorologist. So I wanted to work for the Weather Channel. I wanted to be Jim Cantori, like he is my idol. And that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I was 5 years old and would put, maps on the wall and pretend to do the weather with a spotlight on me. So, but then I got out of undergrad and got out into the workforce, had about 5 years of various logistics and transportation roles, and knew that I needed to go back to school. I'd finished up another weather degree and was like, okay, what now? Do I go take a left turn and go that route? Or do I try to capitalize on the experience that I have within, business and logistics? And I chose supply chain, and the rest is history. And I've done all of that within the last about 6 years. Yeah, 6 years now. So it was definitely not on my radar that this was the route I was going to go at all.
Well, maybe the meteorologist radar, right?
Yeah,
Right, right.
boom.
But people ask all the time. They're like, "Well, how are weather and supply chain related?" And it's like, well, they're both processes. So when it comes down to it, I just like the process mentality and how, one thing leads to the next, leads to the next. And like that's exactly what supply chain logistics are. So it fits me, it suits me. I'm glad I went this route. I still do a little bit of weather as a hobby, but it's just a hobby now. So
That's cool. I mean, did you have a favorite job or position like in your history of supply chain?
ooh, I would have to say I was a supply chain manager internationally during COVID, or actually on the tail end of, or right before COVID kind of hit, and throughout that first year of it. And that was probably my favorite, to be honest. I was handling everything from raw material acquisition down to getting it into the customer's hands, working with a lot of retail outlets. And it was, really cool because it was like the challenge of COVID itself. I don't know, like it made you think in different ways. And that's something that I love is being able to like think and be challenged. And so I would say that's probably been my favorite.
Yeah, that's awesome because I do, as you well know, follow you and your content, and I think it's um, very detailed. And when you write content, it's not like a paragraph or two; it's a storybook. And I love reading storybooks because there's a flow to it, there's a map to it, there's a reason to it, and why you do certain things in supply chain in order to level up and take the next step to be successful. And anything that you write, from my own perspective, being in the business some time, is that it gives people a directive, but it doesn't really tell them the intricacies of how
Right.
it's actually done.
Right.
So you say processes. What process within the supply chain, and there's many, as you well know, do you really, really enjoy? Where do you excel? And do you sell that all the time to your customers? Or is it different all the time?
I would say what I enjoy the most is probably the transportation aspect. That's where a lot of my career has been. Mainly because there's so many modes, there's so many routes, there's so many methods to be able to get a product from point A to point B. But I do enjoy the more end-to-end aspect of it as well, and thinking of it from a process perspective. So when I deal with my clients, I try to approach their business and understand that they have a unique set of operations. Mainly because I don't feel like there's a one size fit all to process improvement or to solutioning. And so I try to make sure that, when I go into a company, that I'm seeking out like what are their competitive, like what's their competitive advantage, their core competencies, where do they shine, and what can we level up with to be able to optimize their operations and take them to the next level and close those gaps. And so I try to approach from a very end-to-end perspective, and I enjoy that because I do understand how everything is very interconnected. But the fun for me in my career was always the transportation side. That was always chaotic and it was always fun.
That's a true fact. That is a true fact. One of the biggest pressing questions that I have personally is, as you know, there's not a tremendous amount of women in your type of role or in the logistics field. Is it getting better? Yes, it's getting better. What is the perception as far as body language and the way that they present themselves and talk to you when you walk into the room? You're a woman. You're most likely, I'm going to take a college guess on this, is you're walking into a room mostly filled with men. How receptive are they to your presence and what they have to say? Do they always counter you and everything that you say, or are they more receptive to what you're offering?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the room. I will say that I have encountered people who are more receptive to the things that I have to say. I've encountered people who are not, and they try to combat me, or they try to argue with what I have to say. And it's not necessarily a I don't want to say it's a bad thing though when people do challenge me in that way, because oftentimes I think it is a fear of what I bring to the table. But I've had to learn throughout, my career, and especially throughout the last year and a half of doing my own business, that I can't let someone else's, fear dull my shine. And I still need to be able to be who I am, and not let that intimidate me. At the end of the day, like, someone else's ego is not my problem. So I can't let that impact me. But I think there's been more people as I've gone on and I've gained a little more credibility, who do listen. And that's been a fun thing to see. So
Well, and to continue that conversation, when you're walking into those rooms, now that you have your own business and you're consulting, do you find that there's a mix of more women, maybe different companies depending on the situation, but how do the women even perceive you? And how is that,
Yeah.
conversation?
Honestly, I've encountered quite a few women who are very, very receptive, because I think we can bond as like women in business and recognize that there's some of these challenges that we've all faced, and be like, hey, we're on the same team here, right? Like, we're all trying to achieve these leadership positions. We're trying to push our ideas and our talents and our skills to where we become the next rising leaders. And so I don't really feel like I've had too much of a negative experience. There's some where it can, they'll make comments of, how insecure, I guess, they feel. And I always try to like level set with that and like tell them, like, there is zero reason to feel that way, because each person is unique in what they bring to the table. And just because I bring certain qualities or skills or knowledges doesn't mean that what someone else brings isn't valuable as well. And so that's why I always try to make sure that, everyone that I interact with feels comfortable around me. And I think that's important, because, we are individuals. We all bring different perspectives. We all bring different outlooks. We've had different experiences in life. And that's what drives everything within business forward, is those perspectives, and outlooks, I guess.
Yeah, and I love that perspective, because I think, like, as much as we're talking about empowering women into logistics and, continuing to push that agenda, I think, some of the recent conversations I've had, specifically with Ellen Boy recently, like talking about women drivers in particular, where you see another woman driver and thinking, oh, great, there's another woman. But sometimes women feel like, well, I've been here longer, or, why do I need to talk to you? Because I think there's a lot of women that are very willing to engage, right, and learn and collaborate, right, where I think some can be standoffish. And I think we all have to help each other. And
Yes.
That's men too included, obviously. But I think you see that from both sides. And I think at the end of the day, like you said, we're all trying to be successful and helping each other, be successful in different ways and supporting each other. So one of the things I wanted to ask you too is, with that being said, now that you're doing your own consulting, what made you decide to do that? And did you have any mentors along the way that like helped you get there, or maybe, make that decision?
Yeah. So actually, I had ended up being let go from my job, and I started the consulting. I had people reaching out asking if I would do some contract work, and I started it as a means to buy the job market at that point. And I slowly started picking up within the business and realized, like, I like this. I like doing my own thing. I like having control over my schedule. I say that with a caveat. I like the freedom. I like being able to try new things. I like being able to think about new things, and do different things. And I would say that it's the people who have surrounded me within the last year that I've met that have really helped me to be able to continue, especially through some of like the harder times. Like, there have been challenging times. But it's been great to see, various people, men and women, step up and be encouraging, or say, hey, I experienced that too. Or, hey, try this, do this, have you thought about this, and brainstorm or things like that. And that's been really great because it's also taught me that despite some of the, I guess, more negative things that I've encountered, there's some really great people out there, and a lot of great people who are willing to help and step in as not even just a business colleague, but as like a friend. And that's been cool. Like I've gained a lot of friends out of like the whole LinkedIn journey, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, I think that that's great. And I think, what you're doing is great. And I think the fact that you didn't let the negativity kind of pull you back and be like, hey, I don't want to do this, or this is too hard, because I think some people do get that in their head and they feel like maybe I shouldn't be doing this. So I think it's awesome. And you were talking to us a little bit about your chaotic schedule, and maybe just telling, the people listening, like, what does that look like and what you're having to put into that to be successful and be your own boss.
Get ready, folks.
Yeah, I would say, I think there's sometimes a misconception of being like an entrepreneur or being your own boss, of like, it's easy. And I don't know where that came from, but I get that a lot from people who are not very cognizant of, like that type of situation. And I mean, my day starts at 3:30 in the morning. I'm scheduled with a calendar hour by hour till about 9 o'clock at night. If it's not on the calendar, it did not happen. I live and die by my calendar. But I'm working on my weekends. Like my free time is spent doing very simple things. And that's, some of that's by design, because I need the disconnect from the mental break. And I just need something of laying on the couch, watching TV, or sitting out by the pool, or, walking my dogs, whatever the case may be. But it's chaotic. That's for sure. And it's always changing. That's the other thing that I've not gotten used to, because, I think as operationally driven people, we like to make sure that we are proactive. We schedule, we're very, I don't want to say like planned, but we try to be as planned as possible. And being on the entrepreneur side, where it's like every day is just completely different, and what happens today can completely change next week. That's been a challenge to like wrap my head around, as someone who likes to be very planned, coordinated, scheduled. So,
well, and it's funny you say that, because I'm a very structured person myself. And and that's something that me and my husband kind of have issues with, because he's not, right? And I am. But in the same token, even though I have the structure and I live by my calendar, stuff just blows up every day. Things happen out of nowhere and whatnot. But I want to circle back on something that you mentioned too, about some of the negative experiences you had. Can you share with us, during your journey, maybe some of those negative experiences that you have had, and maybe what you've learned from them?
Yeah. So I would say that actually fits in really well with like the whole topic of empowering women, some of the challenges as women in business that we face. One of the biggest things that I felt like in the last year was one, a lot of bias or misconception of, who I am just because I am a female. Oftentimes I would hop on some of these calls, and you can tell just from body language, or even in person, people being surprised at, when I would speak or what I would say. And it was because they had a misconception of just being a female. Maybe they weren't expecting what was going to come out of my mouth. Right. And that's been one. The other thing is, I feel like being a male dominated industry, I feel like as women, we are bound to face some of the comments and some of the harassment, I would say. And I've had a lot of comments made that probably shouldn't have been. And, it's something, though, that I've learned to just kind of take and realize through getting a community of other women and meeting other women that they're facing these problems too. And it's helped me to sit here and go, okay, it's not just me, right? Like this is a greater issue that's at hand. And I don't need to change who I am because these other people are making these comments, or these other people are feeling insecure, saying these things. And so it's been a good learning experience in that regard. And so I would challenge any of the women out there who are facing those things. Like you have to learn to like not let it bother you, and realize that you don't need to change who you are to be able to fit in. and, and realize that, hey, maybe you weren't meant to fit in, maybe you're meant to stand out. And that's something that I've had to kind of embrace myself. It's the comments of, oh, well, it's a good old boys club. You got to play the game. You've got to do this. And it's like, it doesn't need to be. I don't need to entertain that. I don't need to be a part of that. I just won't work with that group, or I won't work with that company, because I don't want to be a part of that. Like, I don't want to have to change who I am to fit into something that makes me uncomfortable or makes me feel inferior. And so I would say those are some of the lessons that I've kind of learned in the last year. And it's been a good growth thing, I would say, for me personally. So, and professionally, but most personally.
Yeah, and just to finish that up, before Jeff speaks, I have felt the same thing that you're saying as well, and it has been challenging because I was, 19 when I came into the industry, and sometimes it's like you don't know, like, is this okay, or how are you supposed to react? And sometimes it's people you're working with, it's a customer, it's a carrier, it's a vendor. And I was questioning myself, like, how do I deal with this? Because, you just don't even know. But I do, agree with you, reach out and have these conversations. It's not just one woman. It's a lot of women, unfortunately, that have dealt with this. And we do the same thing too. Like, we stay away from those circles or those potential, people that are causing those issues. And it's really a shame that that's still here today, unfortunately.
I know. And, it's funny you say that, because I often throughout my career, especially early on, I did think it was a me thing. Like, I thought this was something I was going to have to deal with for the rest of my career. And then in the last year, with connecting with just so many other like female business owners or women in business in leadership positions, and hearing that, like, oh, they're dealing with this too. Okay, that doesn't make me feel like it's a me thing. Because like you said, if you don't really know what you don't know, right? And how do you combat that? How do you change that? How do you, deal with it? A lot of times I'll sit in a call and I'll just, okay, and nod my head. And then in the back of my head, I'm going, I will never reach out to this person again, right? And then you hop off and it's like, okay, whatever, blow it off, no big deal. But like early in my career, when I didn't know, those things would linger, right? Like it would weigh on me that these things were being said to me and I was being seen in this way, or that's what someone's perception was. And now I think it's just like, nah, whatever, on to the next. There's 8 billion people in the world, right? Like, whatever.
Absolutely. I want to touch base on, it's a 2-point question here. Do you feel that you have to work harder to prove yourself as a woman? And if not, what's the alternative for a woman that's out there that doesn't feel that can be much stronger than what they think they are? Because sometimes they kind of hold it in a little bit. They don't want to feel like outspoken, that kind of stuff. So what do you say to that?
Yeah. So I would say I do feel like I've had to work a lot harder. I actually had people pretty early on with starting my business tell me that, I'm not credible. My experience didn't qualify me. My education didn't qualify me, that I was not credible and I was going to have to prove myself in this industry. And it can be very discouraging. I mean, it can be very discouraging. And to sit there and think like you're putting in all these hours, you're putting in all this time, you're putting in all this energy and all this effort, and that's what you're being met with, right? Yeah. So like that can be out there still, but I would say, like, again, I would speak up. Like, now I've learned it's okay to speak up, and I've learned that there's professional ways to say, like, hey, I don't appreciate that being said, right? I don't appreciate you coming at me like that. I've learned that. Or again, as we just talked about, just not doing business with those people, not feeling like you have to do that because it's not the only thing that's out there, right? And so for me, I've learned that there are professional ways to stand up for yourself. And you can do that through not working with those people and finding a different circle or finding other business. There's, like I said, there's 8 billion people out there. And there's a lot of business to be had who aren't operating or, behaving in that manner, I guess.
Yeah. And, I'm a firm believer that if you're not learning every single day, you're going to get left behind.
Right.
Now, this is a pertinent question here. Do you feel, maybe I should rephrase that, is that one of the reasons why you wanted to over-educate yourself in supply chain, having 2 MBAs, getting a PhD, because you want to prove yourself?
Yeah, so it's funny you ask that, because I would say when I first started my academic journey, I would say that was the reason, yes. However, I do love school. I know that sounds very bizarre. I do love school. I do love the academic side. I'm doing some adjunct teaching, which I've had so much fun with. I've done some guest lectures at universities, it's entertaining for me. And I love being able to educate, the rising workforce. And that is something that I didn't realize I was going to enjoy. So that's been something I've found some fun in here within the last year too. But, I would say that at the start of, going the route of academia, was that why I was pursuing it? Yes, because I felt like I had to give myself a leg up or one up others, in the field.
Sure.
And to put myself above some of my male counterparts, and make myself stand out. So yeah, I would say to start with, yes. However, I found enjoyment in learning. I know it sounds crazy.
Well, I would say I didn't find enjoyment in it, to be honest, but I'm glad you did. That's awesome. But I hate that you felt like you had to do that.
I know.
Yeah.
And honestly, just to share an experience I had, like working for my father, and I quit college, right? And eventually he put me in the president role. And at the same time, it was like, well, because you don't have the education, we need to hire people with education. Meanwhile, you put me in this role and I don't have the education. And it didn't make me feel like I had to go get it. I did feel, though, that I had to work harder to prove myself. And it was that determination to prove myself. And I think I've talked a lot about having to get decisions done or made through other men within my organization, even up to my father, because again, he put me in that role, but it was almost like I didn't have the education. I didn't have enough experience. So he didn't truly believe in me, where it was like, why did you do that? If that, so I just kept pushing though. And I love the fact that you did push yourself to, if that's what you had to do to make yourself feel that you were worthy, but just know, that's not something you had to do. But no, I appreciate you sharing that, because that's something that's, a lot of people go through that, feeling like that you're not there. And I mean, when you're at some of these companies and you're talking with them, I mean, how do you feel like, I guess the vibe is when you're in those rooms, and do you feel like, again, I'm not asking you to name companies, but do you feel like there's a lot of support for women within those companies and trying to help them get up the ladder? I mean,
to be honest, and this is probably going to be a little blunt, but no, I think sometimes it's very placated, to be quite frank. I think a lot of times it's for show. In some companies, do I want to say all? No, but in some companies, I do think it's for show. And you see that. I mean, I just saw a story, maybe like 5 months ago, 3 to 5 months ago, about how women were gaining traction in leadership positions and now they aren't anymore. So like, what's the reason for that? Is it because they're not qualified? Is it because, they're just failing at what they're doing? If that's the case, why aren't they getting the help like some of the, their male counterparts do? And so I think I would say that in some companies, no, I think it's just placated. I think it's just for show. Unfortunately.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I will say when it comes to marketing with some stuff, whether it's the diversity spend, I feel the same way about some of those companies. It's really just for show as well. And just saying we're doing this, we believe in this, but they're really not following that mission. So,
right. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to go to our sponsor break right now.
Sponsors.
Got
Yeah.
a few minutes here.
Yes, we want to thank our sponsors, Freight Validate, TAFs, and Thai Software. So let's get into it. We have our good friends at Freight Validate. Freight Validate, the ultimate identity and compliance verification system for the logistics industry. Freight Validate empowers shippers, brokers, carriers, and more to ensure compliance with regulations and mitigate fraud risk. With Freight Validate, you can easily verify entities' compliance status and identify potential threats within minutes. Don't risk your business with unverified carriers or brokers. Choose Freight Validate for peace of mind. Learn more at freightvalidate.com and start your verification process today.
Freight Validate, revolutionizing identity and compliance verification for shippers, brokers, and motor carriers with cutting-edge technology. Now, experience the power of voice-activated information retrieval with Siri and Alexa. Hey Siri, check Freight Validate.
Sure, what's the MC number?
387211.
The company Direct Expedite LLC is a broker and is freight validated. Company ownership has completed facial recognition verification. Basic company identity verification, risk assessment, and compliance info has been verified by freightvalidate.com. Please follow company protocols for additional safety and compliance vetting. For more information, please go to freightvalidate.com.
Freight Validate ensures complete access to our state-of-the-art identity and compliance verification system. Speed, accuracy, and savings all in one package. Don't miss out. Upgrade to Freight Validate today. Fraud starts with fraud. It ends with Freight Validate.
Our next sponsor is TAFs Inc. Sorry, everyone, I was on mute, which provides transportation factoring solutions to boost profits and increase cash flow for small and medium-sized companies. Contact TAFs at tafs.com to elevate your financial success.
Trucking excellence meets unparalleled service. Enjoy exclusive benefits like our fantastic tire discounts. Need cash fast? Try our 1-hour advances. Plus, we're here for you 365 days a year. Need loads? We have a pro dispatch service. This is why TAFs was recognized as the top factoring company in 2023. You'll benefit from strategic partnerships for enhanced operations. Access business loans and manage your finances easily with our client portal, F2 Fuel Card, and mobile app. At TAFs Factoring, we're more than just a factoring company. We're your partner in success. Contact us today to see how we can help your trucking business thrive.
And our last sponsor is Thai TMS. Simplifies freight management for brokers, offering an all-in-one platform for quoting, booking, and tracking shipments. Learn more at thaisoftware.com.
Brokering, success demands a battle-ready strategy. Thai TMS equips brokers with the ultimate battle station for conquering a tough market. With Thai, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform where rate intelligence and quote history converge on a single screen. It's not just a page. It's a strategic command center designed to help brokers win. Thai equips your team with all the data they need to negotiate with confidence and allows them to communicate directly with carriers and customers from a simple control base. Revolutionize the way your brokers perform by giving them a competitive advantage with Thai TMS. For more info, scan the QR code or go to thai-software.com/battlestation.
Well, I guess I messed that one up a little bit.
That's live, folks.
Right. Authentic here. Well, getting back into the show, I guess a couple of the things I wanted to ask as well. Do you have some women who aspire, well, I guess inspire you, that you have followed that, has helped you along your journey?
I would say there's quite a few actually. And each one, I mainly keep up with them on LinkedIn and follow their content because it's a learning opportunity for me. But every single one of them that I've been able to meet with, I've learned something from them, or they've given a piece of advice that has like stuck with me, and each one has done that. I mean, I know, like I remember I spoke with Sarah Barnes Humphrey a while back, and I remember, just her giving me some advice that was like, oh, okay, cool, this is great, And then I've spoken with Sarah Scudder, right, and like her advice, and these are some of the more prominent women who are leading by example in our industry, and willing to talk to people like me who were pretty early on and didn't really have a name or a voice. And so I think that's important. And that's something that I've tried to do throughout the last year and a half as well, as, as I connect with people, making sure that they know, especially females, that they know, reach out to me anytime you need advice. I tutor college students. I work with college students as well, and I mentor them. And it's like, the females that I'm working with, I always try to make sure that they know when they get out in the workforce, reach out to me. Let me know if you need advice. Let me know if you need help. I mean, I've got other female friends who will text about different things. We'll hop on a call once a month and chat. And, it's people I've met through LinkedIn, people I've met through various jobs, but we've stayed in contact as a support because, I think I mentioned at the beginning, like we're all facing some of the same issues.
Yeah, and it's about like making it easier for other people so they don't have to go through
Right.
the challenges maybe you did, right?
Yes.
And I think that that's so important, and I think that's one of the things that I'd love doing too, and giving back, but you also learn from them too.
Yes.
Just different things in different ways. So I think that that's great.
Yeah. And it's been fun too, because I never had someone like that when I got out like into the workforce. And, I wish I did. I mean, I've had some great female bosses and leaders throughout my career, but it was many years after I started like out in the workforce. And I wish I had someone like that. And so now, like, I strive to be the person that I wish I had when I got out into the workforce. And so it's been a fun journey to kind of learn some of those things and hear like what are some of the fears that rising workforce is encountering, especially from a female perspective. What are some of the things that early career females are dealing with that I can say, hey, watch out for this, don't do this, you don't need to do that, you don't need to change who you are, things like that. So it's been really fun, to be honest.
Love that.
Yeah, yeah. Based on your extensive experience in the industry, what advice would you offer women who inspire to get into a leadership role?
Never back down. That's one. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't achieve something, because I've been told that. I've been told you're not good enough. I've been told you don't have the experience, you don't have this, you don't have that. And plenty of people will try to tell you their 2 cents, and you can't let it deter you from achieving what you know that you're capable of achieving. And I think sometimes, and I mentioned this before, we as women feel like we have to change who we are to be able to fit into that mentality. And I would say, don't do it. Don't do it. Stand up and move forward and be a powerhouse, because that's the only way that you're actually going to drive change and make a difference, is if you stand up to it and you don't let it break you down.
Yes, I'll agree. What do you think is the biggest obstacle or barrier that you had to break through?
Oh gosh, I still think I'm trying to break through that. I would say some of it's, like I said, the bias or the egos, or the misconceptions. I would say those are probably the biggest things. The other thing is there is a lot of, or there is a lack of like mentorship for women as well. I mean, yeah, we've got it behind the scenes, but from a more present and open level, I would say there's a lack of mentorship. It was so funny because I was talking to a male counterpart about how, they take their clients out to the golf course and things like that, and how women are to either cater to that or where else is business going to be done. And I'm like, and I asked him, I said, well, I'm going to start telling my male clients they can come join me at the nail salon, right? Like, what's the difference? Why do I need to go cater to what they want when it's a two-way street here? And I mean, I know throughout my career, like I've, I love sports. I love watching sports. That's something I've always been a sporty person. But some of that is to have a conversation starter because, I mean, what am I going to talk about, in terms of getting my hair done? Like most men aren't going to be able to talk about that, right? So it's one of those things where, I feel like as women, we should strive to be who we are and not conform to having to learn about sports or go play golf, or unless you want to, but we shouldn't have to conform to that. Instead, we should have our own methods of how we're engaging in business and how we're engaging, with our male counterparts.
Yeah. You brought out another good question. You talked about men going to the golf course, being a woman, being invited to go out to dinner or to an event. How do you feel about that? And what should women, I mean, let's face it, it's a cruel world out there.
It is.
A lot of people cannot be trusted out there. It's
Yes.
really unfortunate that we have to talk about this.
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself? Because I'm sure that, especially if somebody you're just meeting and they're like,
Right.
hey, Casey, let's go out, have dinner, have a cocktail. I'd love to hear more about that. What goes through your head? And of course, you're a consultant. You want to make money. You
Right.
want to present yourself in the right way. How do you protect yourself? What goes through your head? And this is to help other women out there who are thinking about doing the same thing that you're doing, or
Right.
maybe a little less, but going to find themselves on a one-on-one. What do you do?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things is I always try to do like a virtual meet and greet first, so I can get kind of the vibe of the person. And I've done that with people here locally. I live in Savannah. I've done that with people here locally where I'll get on a one-on-one like virtual thing like this and just have a conversation. So I at least know who they are, what they look like. I try not to do blind very often. Unless it is someone who's like known, like on LinkedIn, and I follow, like you meet your LinkedIn friends in real life sometimes, but
Absolutely.
the one-on-one stuff, I'll try to make suggestions of, coffee or lunch instead of dinner. I've always felt kind of uncomfortable about the whole dinner thing. Being a female, like meeting a man one-on-one, like that just makes me uncomfortable. So like I try to suggest other things. Like I said, coffee, lunch, even just meeting in a public place that's, 2:00 in the afternoon. Right. But it's always a very public place. And I've done dinners before. Once I've gotten to know people, like then I'm more okay doing that stuff, but not for like a first time meet. I try not to be honest.
Understood.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I was just on a podcast with Sarah Barnes Humphrey, and we talked about going to conferences and, kind of like when you go to a dinner with a male or whatnot and who's paying the bill. But I also kind of flipped it too, where there might be some men out there too that kind of almost feel like they don't want to come off a certain way too.
Yep.
Which I think is interesting because I think sometimes we forget about that part as well. So it's definitely interesting. But I wanted to ask you as well, obviously as a leader in the industry, and you've been around a lot of different companies and doing a lot of different things, why do you feel diversity is important? And what are some steps you think that organizations can take? And specifically, I know we talked a lot about women, but men,
Yes.
To help in that conversation.
Yeah. So I would say the diversity thing, I I always say I didn't pay attention to it, but like early in my career, I just thought this is how it was in business, right? I thought this is how it was going to be. And I think once the conversations kind of started, of realizing that, hey, we all have different backgrounds, we all have different perspectives, we all have different cultural perspectives as well. We all come from very different places, right? And I think that is something that does contribute well within a business setting because it allows us to think in ways that aren't very streamlined, right? It allows us to have a whole, I guess, pot of ways to perceive problems, of ways to perceive solutions, of ways to think about things that are driven by everyone's experiences. And so I think it is important in organizations because as we evolve from a business landscape perspective, we need all types of backgrounds and experiences and insight of all levels too. It not just like from an academic perspective, but even entry level, even people who don't have degrees, even like we need all of that because that's how we're going to be able to approach things and grow as a society and as a business. So I would say that businesses need to focus more on bringing people together of all levels within their organizations. One thing that I often see is that a lot of times your leadership or your C-suites have no idea what's going on at the executional level or at the entry level.
True.
And it ends up creating, where these companies want to implement new solutions or streamline, and they do things that are just so disconnected. They're so out of touch from what's actually occurring. And why is that, right? Because they're only being fed executive level things. They're not actually hearing, the people in the weeds executing on a daily basis. And so bridging that gap allows for more ideas to be shared, more perspective to be shared. And then when you bring in the fact that we are all different, we all have different backgrounds and insight, that just helps to, again, approach solutioning and approach these problems in a more holistic perspective.
Agreed.
I love that. And one of the things I'll say too is like I have a leadership team now that we have 6 people on, and 2 of them have come from outside the company, which I think is so important because the rest of them have been with me 14 plus years.
Right.
And and honestly, I feel like sometimes it's like you're blind to some of the stuff, and so we're really focusing on that as a company ourselves and just seeing how that's changing, because sometimes, again, it's like you get in this tunnel of this is what we think we should be doing. And then you have the outside people that have different experiences then being involved. And we're really trying to focus on, like you said, then going down to the next level and making sure that same message is not only brought down to them, but how is it being conveyed to the rest of the team too?
Right.
Also getting their input. And I think, I've always been a transparent leader within my company and wanting to hear people's input. But I think now more than ever, and really sharing that diversity, I think is really important. No matter what gender you are, it's just very important for sure. So.
Yeah, you need that second set of eyes. I've always said that you want other people's perspectives from different areas within the supply chain, especially when you're trying to coordinate a new process, a work instruction.
Right.
You want S and OP involved in that. You want all the mechanisms, people who touches that, key stakeholders, get them in the same room on the same table so that everybody has a perfect, well-rounded opportunity to speak their piece,
right,
where you have a better picture of what's going on. It doesn't matter if they're women or men. It doesn't matter at all. You want the best people in the best places that's going to represent the problem. Period.
Right.
End of discussion, because you cannot move that peanut forward unless they're involved in it. And I'm with you. I think that's the most important thing, of making, it's part of change management. Basically, that's what it is. And if you're doing it correctly, things will work out and evolve in the way that you foresee it, and everybody's pleased because everybody has a piece of making that happen.
Right. So to follow that up too, like, what do you think are some of the benefits that you have learned from being a female in leadership?
Yeah, I would say, oh gosh, that's a good question. I would say that one of the things is, I always strive to have a very servant leadership style, meaning that I like to make sure that the people I work with or my teams are served. And so one of the benefits of like having that approach is that I know that I'm actually helping. I know that I'm actually listening. I know that I'm actually hearing what they have to say. I'm paying attention to what drives them. I'm paying attention to what their problems are. I'm actually seeing them as human beings and not just a cog in the machine. And I think that, it's one of those things where I never really, again, being in some of the roles I've been in, I've never really been in a position where I got to be that type of leader. And now it's like, it's so much more rewarding when I get to work with people, to make them feel comfortable and know that they're heard and that their perspective does matter and that their outlooks and their insight does matter to me, and is contributing to, what we're working on. So.
That's yeah, that's awesome. Do you have experience resistance when you are leading men, and how do you deal with that?
Oh, yes. Oh, I've got some stories. That could probably take us another hour.
I got time.
Yeah, let's hear some. We want to share some so that,
Yeah,
everyone
let's
can
go.
No, I mean, I have definitely, where I've brought up a solution or an idea and it's immediately shot down with, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. You've not been here long enough. You don't have the experience, this, that, or the other. And, how I deal with that is just I try to, take it and say, okay, that's fine. But again, have you thought of this? Have you thought, like I just start to ask other questions to highlight like where and guide their thinking really. So in a way, I'm not necessarily like just receiving it and moving on. I'm more of like trying to re-guide their thinking to get them to where I want them to think. And so I don't want to say it's like a manipulation thing, but it kind of is. But it's more of like sometimes when I say things, I'm thinking 8 steps ahead of everyone else. So I'm already at the solution where most people are just starting to begin to identify what the problem is. And so I'll come up with something and maybe they don't realize how I got there. And so that's why I try to ask leading questions to where then they can sit and think, oh, this is how. And that's how I kind of lead it that way. Is that kind of bothersome to me that I'm not heard sometimes? Yes. But at the end of the day, I also am cognizant of the fact that, other people that I interact with think very differently than I do. And so it may just be a lack of not understanding like how I got to that end goal and maybe not necessarily resistance, or at least that's how I try to see it, is more positive than resistance. So.
Right, right. No, I definitely hear you on that. I mean, especially when you know the answer and you want them to make believe they found the answer
Yes.
to the question,
Yes.
and you kind of remove your.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
I think he froze. Oh, there he is. He popped up. This is what live's all about.
This is what it happens to me all the time. So I know I have to start paying my bills. So I know I have a crappy internet. I swear to God, but that's a whole different story. But hey, we are coming to the end of the show. I appreciate so much, Casey, for you coming on board. I've learned a tremendous amount. I love learning every single day and hearing other people talk about the industry. I love the fact that you're more on the transportation side of the business than anything else, but you definitely know how the masters of the mechanisms of logistics, how they turn and burn and how they affect everything from cradle to grave, from the raw material to the manufacturing to the end user. It brightens up my day that some people know what they're talking about, and you do. And I love that. I really do. And I'll definitely continue to follow you. Those of you who are not connected to Casey Jenkins, please connect to her. She is always writing some great content on LinkedIn. She's someone that you should definitely listen to because she's got a lot of, I'll say, platinum nuggets, much better than golden. So
Well,
please do that.
speaking of the nuggets, can you give us a couple nuggets of advice for our viewers, women or men in the industry?
Oh, related to what? I've got all sorts of stuff.
Anything
too.
you want to share?
Ooh. I would say, okay, if you're trying to make any sort of changes within your organizations, especially when it comes from an operational standpoint, you've got to have a baseline. Document your processes first, identify where your gaps are, make sure you're getting to the root of the issue and that you are actually solving the problem. Do not just slap technology over bad processes and expect
Boom.
it to work. That would be my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I love that because nowadays people are just throwing automation at everything that's out there and not thinking how they interconnect with each other and how important it is to find that master tool that can give you all of that information, critical data information, all in one shot, not segmented in each area of the logistics operation. So that's key. I like that. So thank you again so much for joining us. We hope that you'll come back and join us again in the near future.
Hopefully, if you want me to.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, folks out there, we appreciate you joining the Storytelling Chronicles, empowering women into logistics. We go live every single Monday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until the next show, 17th, we will see you then. And everybody enjoy the week, and we'll see you shortly. Take care now.
Bye.